So, last week I broke down what I thought to be the best movies of 2024 so far, since we are about 7 months into the year, just a little over halfway. Today I want to talk about the opposite side of the coin. What have been the worst films of 2024 so far? Films that I saw that I just did not like all that much. And I like to be a little more careful on this channel. I don't like to truly highlight the stinkers as much as I really put on a platform the best movies of the year. But still, it is fun to talk about some of the funniest, the dopiest, the cringiest, the worst films that we have received each and every year. This year has had its fair share of stinkers, and that's what I'm going to be doing today. I'm going to be talking about the ones that come to mind in no particular order. At the end of the year, I will put them in order from worst to absolute stinking pile of dog shit. Today, I'm just going to go all through them just in a random order, and you guys can make up your mind on which one you think is worse. Also, I'm sure there are other films that I have completely forgotten about that I saw this year, because yet again, this is a worst films list, so there are some forgettable films that I didn't like very much that I'm not going to talk about here today because I forgot about them, which means they're probably worse than any of the films on this list. Before I get into it, please make sure to like this video, subscribe for more, turn on notifications, all that jazz. I upload every single day, so stick around if you want to hear me talk about more movies and stuff. First up is Horizon, American Saga Chapter 1. This is the first film of a planned 4-film saga that Kevin Costner's been planning for decades, and it is by far, so far, my most disappointing movie of the year. This is a movie and a series I was really looking forward to because I am a big Kevin Costner fan. I am also a big Western fan, and I have been waiting for the next big Western film to kind of break into Hollywood and sort of revive the genre a little bit. And this is a film that, based off the trailers, I was very excited for. It looked big and epic and ambitious and beautiful, and it had a beautiful song in the trailer. Everything about the trailer just looked great. And now that I've seen the movie, it sucks. It's just a slog. This is a movie that ended up being over 3 hours long, and it's a part 1, a movie that is really a prologue to a bigger story. It's just kind of setting the table. The film follows 4 different stories, and 3 of those 4 stories are very boring. So when you're actually following the one story that is interesting, the movie's okay. It's actually, you know, it's upbeat, it keeps a decent pace, it's entertaining, but whenever it's on any of the stories that are not as engaging and are just kind of slogging along, this film just is so boring. This film does have its bright spots. I think the first 20 minutes are absolutely brilliant. I think Kevin Costner is a lot of fun in this film, as he is in everything he does, but this is one that I just had such big expectations for, and it just ended up being a film that I never want to watch again, because it was kind of torture to watch. I'll be seated for Chapter 2, though. I'm hoping it's a little bit better, but this is one that I think it might already be too late. I think it's already dead.
Already dead.
Next is the ISS, a film that I almost forgot about until I started developing this video, and I said, I did see the ISS, didn't I? That came out this year. This is a movie that had a really cool concept that I actually kind of dug, and a really good first trailer. It takes place on the ISS, the International Space Station, where Americans and Russians sort of share that space. And while they're up there enjoying their lives, doing their thing in space, a nuclear war breaks out between the two countries. Therefore, a conflict on the spaceship will now break out, or will it? And that's kind of the question of the movie. Despite the fact that there's a war going down on planet Earth, will they fight in the spaceship? That is a cool concept that in actual action and in play here just did not make for a very compelling film. And why is that? Well, because at the end of the day, this whole film is kind of confined into this small space with these characters that are just not very interesting, and the things that are happening on this spaceship are never as interesting as the premise actually sets up. The war on Earth is interesting. The actual conflict and the world building behind it is cool, but this film, yet again, like Horizon, just ends up being kind of boring. It slogs through its pace. You never really get hooked into most of the characters, so when things happen to them, bad things or good things, they just never feel satisfying. The scares and the horror and the suspense of the film never actually hits, and this film just felt like it was missing something to actually make it worth watching, and it just altogether just is empty and forgettable and not very good. Next is Madam Web. You knew this was going to be on here. Madam Web is terrible. It's one of, if not the worst superhero movie of all time, but in saying that, it's better than every film on this list. Why? Because I would go back and watch Madam Web before any film that I'm talking about today because it is so damn fun. Madam Web is easily one of those so bad it's hilarious, so bad it's fun, and so bad that it just might be great type of movies. This film, what do you even say about this film? Set in a universe without Spider-Man, but a Spider-Man type universe, we follow Dakota Johnson, who plays this woman who could see into the future, and she has to assemble this team of Spider-Women and save them from this bad guy who is just constantly having his audio dubbed over, and it never aligns with his lips. It's kind of hilarious. And it's just this weird kind of like time travel-y Terminator-style film that actually on paper I think could have been a cool concept, but there's just so much wrong with this film. A, the script doesn't work here. It's so clear that this entire movie was changed in the editing room and in reshoots, that this was a different movie that they reshaped into something else, because this movie, just the pacing and the structure of it makes absolutely no sense. The performances, it's very, very clear everybody in this movie did not want to be there, including Dakota Johnson, who made it very clear in post-production that she did not want to be in this movie. Some people here do a good job, like I think Sydney Sweeney's fine. The action's not very good, the CGI is absolutely terrible, the costumes are really, really cool, but they're barely ever on screen. The villain is laughable, the dialogue is just bad. This is easily one of the goofiest movies ever. It's just not good, and I can clown on it more, but we've already done that on YouTube. Everybody's already done that on YouTube, so let's move on. Now we got MaXXXine, a movie you might be surprised to see, because I know a lot of people like this one. This is a movie that just came out, and I just saw it. I put out a review yesterday, and I just did not like this one at all. I'm gonna be honest, I'm not the biggest fan of this Ty West trilogy of films, you know, X and Pearl and now MaXXXine. I think the first two films are fine. I would give them like 3 out of 5s. I don't love them, but I think they're good movies. MaXXXine, on the other hand, I just did not dig this movie at all. From start to finish, I just could not find much to love about this one. It's a film where we follow MaXXXine after the events of X, where she's in LA, you know, chasing her dreams of being a big Hollywood star, and she gets swept up in this whole Night Stalker mystery, the serial killer going around and killing people around her, and what's going on, and who is this killer, and all that stuff. It's a concept and a story that's very simple. It's been done a billion times before, and it should have worked here as a slasher film in this already established universe, but something about this film in particular just never clicks. You never feel the suspense of these killers, the Night Stalker. You never feel the horror of it. You never actually feel the danger that MaXXXine's in, or care about the people around her getting off, because the people around her are just not very interesting characters and are never given time to develop. By the time the movie actually ramps up into its third act, despite the fact that you're actually bored, even when the reveals sort of start to come and you start understanding what's actually happening, none of it feels satisfying whatsoever. It just kind of lands completely flat on its face. This is a film that I just did not like at all. It didn't feel like a satisfying conclusion to this trilogy. It didn't even feel like a satisfying movie in its own right. I was just kind of disappointed by it. Now we got a couple Netflix ones for you, a couple streaming movies, actually. There's another streaming one at the end here. First up is Damsel. This is the Millie Bobby Brown film that came out a few months back that a lot of you definitely forgot about. This movie stinks. Millie Bobby Brown is an actress that I'm not going to get too hard on, but she's an actress that a lot of her stuff outside of Stranger Things I just haven't really particularly liked. Now, Damsel is a movie that is set in a fantasy universe where Millie Bobby Brown's character goes and she has to marry this prince, but she finds out it's a big trick. She gets thrown into, like, this cave and has to fight a dragon, and now you have a movie. On paper, this actually sounds really cool, like a lot of the movies that I've talked about on this list. It actually is an interesting concept. I dig fantasy. I love fantasy. I read fantasy. I watch fantasy movies, so I dig anything that is in the fantasy genre. And the first 20 minutes of this movie I actually really liked. There's something whimsical and magical about this world. The cinematography is beautiful. The music is wonderful. There's something that I really, really liked about that first 20 minutes that hooked me, that brought me in. But once you actually get into the plot of the movie, with Millie Bobby Brown being this strong female character fighting these dragons, and the lore of the dragons, and the world building, and the reveals, and everything with the prince, the movie just slowly becomes a train wreck, a slow-motion car crash into nothingness. And by the time you reach the end of the movie, you realize you just wasted nearly 2 hours of your life. And then we have Atlas, which is even worse than Damsel. This movie is depressingly bad, and it is a perfect example of everything that is wrong with Hollywood today. This is a big-budget movie that is emptier than whatever the hell is going on right now inside the mind of President Joe Biden. This movie has a lot going for it on paper. You have Simu Liu playing a very eccentric, charismatic villain, and he actually has a lot of fun in this role and is probably the best part of the film. You have Jennifer Lopez, who is a big-ticket actress, who I don't understand why she's a big-ticket actress. It's a gigantic movie about AI, which is a very relevant subject. It's a gigantic war movie. How could this go wrong? Well, it goes wrong because the writing, the script, and the actual concept and thought process of this film is absolutely nothing. This film was made for one reason and one reason only, to get you to click on it when you saw the nice little poster on Netflix, watch it for 45 minutes, and then fall asleep or go do something else. That's the purpose of this movie. There is no artistry behind it. There is nothing entertaining about this movie particularly. There is nothing special in the storytelling here. This movie is a waste of everybody's time and everybody's money that actually had to work on it. I'm sorry that you guys were forced to work on this and not something a little bit better. You guys deserve better. Atlas is embarrassing, and it's another reason why Netflix is just the worst, maybe the worst company working in film right now. I think Disney might have them beat by a little bit. But granted, credit to Disney, I don't have a Disney movie on this list. Should I change that? Am I missing something? Have they just not released any movies this year? It appears that most of the Disney movies come out in the second half. The only one I've seen is Inside Out 2, and that's a fine movie. It's not on this list. So good job, Disney. You've stayed out of my graphs. So good job, Disney. You've stayed out of my way so far. If I made a worst TV shows list of this year, you would be getting that #1 spot. The Acolyte, just absolutely brilliant stuff you got going on there. Next up is Roadhouse, the remake of the original Roadhouse movie that never needed a remake. And why is this movie? Why? Why is this movie? I guess to give us the great Conor McGregor memes that we've gotten.
I can't see what this is about. Where the fuck is everyone?
And that's pretty much all this movie has going for it. It's the goofy memes that this movie created, which is fine. If that's what you like movies to do, then yeah, great job. Roadhouse is a fun time. But what is this movie actually? It is a soft remake of that original film that is boring and empty and lifeless and pointless and really fun for like 15 minutes spread throughout. And you have a Jake Gyllenhaal performance. Jake Gyllenhaal is having so much fun making this movie. And you know, a director who's sort of capable and knows what he's doing here. But this film just felt like a waste of my time while watching it. It wasn't offering me anything. It wasn't even offering me entertainment because most of the movie is boring. This is a film that went right to streaming, and the director and Jake Gyllenhaal brought the movie to Jeff Bezos to try to convince him to show this film in theaters and release it in a wide theater release, and Jeff Bezos said, no. Thank you, Jeff. We love you. Next up is Imaginary. I wanted to have one horror movie on here. I was deciding between Imaginary and The Night Swim. And The Night Swim, at the very, very least, is so goofy that it's a lot of fun. I love The Night Swim. It's so bad, but it's hilariously bad, and that makes it good. Imaginary is just boring, and that's, like, to me, the biggest crime in film. If you've noticed a trend with most of these movies, there are bad films, and then there are bad films that are at least fun and a good time. Like, M. Night Shyamalan, right? M. Night Shyamalan makes a lot of movies, a lot of bad movies, but a lot of those movies that are bad, I still go back and watch because they're so much fun despite the fact that they're terrible, like Old. Imaginary is not one of those films. It's just boring. It's lifeless. It's forgettable, and it's a concept that I actually thought was cool. It's something that has kind of been done before, but never directly. It's a horror movie where the scares are imaginary friends that are haunting this kid and haunting the mother, and like that's a cool concept, and this movie does have some interesting ideas that I think maybe in a sequel could be utilized better and developed more. I said it in my original review, although I did not like this movie whatsoever, I think a sequel actually could be good and could be done well. It's a cool concept that just did not work in this first film because the script is kind of just unsure of what this film was. It's not really scary at times. The scares that are set up and the practicality of them are very generic. The third act has a weird, like, gotcha moment. Like, you thought the movie was over, but gotcha, it's actually not. And it just doesn't work. It works in a lot of horror movies. It's a trope that's done a lot. It just did not work in this one, because as an audience, you're at the point where you're getting ready to get up and leave the theater, and then you realize you're still in the middle of the third act, and you're like, I guess I'm sitting here for another 10 minutes? I just didn't love this one. I know a lot of other people didn't love this one. I know most people forgot about this one. So let's forget it and move on. One more horror movie, just because we were talking about Shyamalan, and I remembered a movie that I forgot. The Watcher, which was directed by daughter Shyamalan, the daughter of M. Night Shyamalan, a person who, listen, I kind of had low expectations for this one because she is related to M. Night Shyamalan, and I always just assume that the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Bad habits will fall to the next generation, and yes, this movie is pretty bad, but not in the same way M. Night's movies are bad, so I take that back. This movie is not bad because she's a Shyamalan, because it's very different than M. Night's bad movies. It's just a movie that felt like a miss. It felt like a swing and a miss. It's a movie that has some really good ideas, it has a really great setup, but it just doesn't do much with the setup, and the third act is extremely goofy. The Watcher is basically about this woman who gets trapped in the woods, and she's in this little tiny, like, cabin thing, this little facility with this big one-way mirror, and there are some creatures and monsters that come every single night and watch her and the other people that are in this place. They just watch it for whatever reason. It's a cool concept. This movie had really good trailers, and I think the first act, although a little slow and a little boring, does set up what could have been an interesting movie. Unfortunately, it just does not do much with that setup. It doesn't do much with the creatures, the scares, and where it eventually goes just ends up being kind of hilarious more so than scary or thought-provoking. And this is a film that just kind of felt like a dud. It doesn't have the goofy M. Night Shyamalan dialogue to at least make it fun to laugh at. No, it doesn't have any of that. It has standard dialogue, a standard plot, and it's just a movie that everybody's already forgotten about. So, yet again, let's forget about it. Now I got one more movie left. One more stinker. And this, to me, I said I wouldn't put these in order. This, to me, is the worst movie of the year because it's a movie that I think is kind of shameful and also disappointing and just a representation of kind of what's wrong with a lot of stuff going on in Hollywood. I'm talking about Rebel Moon Part 2. I forgot what the hell the movie's called. I just know it's the second Rebel Moon movie, coming from Zack Snyder, a director that I love. I love Zack Snyder's movies. I am a huge Zack Snyder fan. But this is a movie and a series that represents what happens when a director who is very solid and very good at making specific things decides to make something way bigger, way more ambitious than they are capable of handling, and a studio that is giving them a blank check and total freedom to do that. Rebel Moon is a bloated, gigantic mess of a film, and this is only the second one. The first one is just as bad, maybe even worse. Rebel Moon Part 2 is essentially the first movie done again. It's the same movie, the same plot. These bad Nazi dudes who they thought they killed in the first movie are coming back, and we gotta fight them. It's the same thing as the first one. The first movie, when it ended, the one thing I said is at least it set up what could be an interesting sequel, where the world continues to expand, we get to go see more stuff, fight more bad guys, and just see more of this universe that Snyder had created. Instead, the second movie in this series just does the same exact thing again, giving you little bits of world building, because the world here, I think, is actually cool enough. I dig these weird sci-fi or fantasy worlds. That is what I love about storytelling, when you can create these interesting and unique worlds, especially that incorporate politics and kingdoms and all that shit. I love that, and I wanted more of that, and unfortunately you don't get that in this film. You just get these boring characters fighting these boring villains on this boring-ass planet for almost 3 hours. This is a disaster. And I can get into the over-reliance on slow-mo, the mediocre CGI, the bad, visual effects, cinematography, all that stuff, the terrible dialogue, the performances that leave a lot to be desired. I can get into all of that. But at the very center of this is just a movie that needed somebody to step in and tell Zack Snyder, hey, you are a phenomenal filmmaker. Watchmen kind of transcended the superhero genre before the superhero genre exploded. Man of Steel is an incredible film. 300 is very influential. These are movies that you made that are incredible. Go back to doing stuff like that and focusing on what made those movies great, and maybe incorporate that into a big sci-fi thing. Instead, we get Zack Snyder's attempt to make and recreate a gigantic version of Star Wars, and it just does not work at all, and that's disappointing, and I hope he changes course and goes and does something else, because Rebel Moon is not him. It's not it. It's not it. That's the video. Those are the worst movies of the year so far. Let me know which ones I missed down below, and let me know how you love most of these movies. And I'm an idiot, and the ISS is a 5 out of 5, and Rebel Moon is the greatest movie ever. I'm naming my child Rebel based on Rebel Moon. It's an incredible piece of art. Who knows? You might be right. I might be wrong. Maybe Damsel will win Best Picture at the Oscars, right? Probably not. Stranger things have happened. Get it? Millie Bobby Brown? I'll stop. I'll leave now. Everybody have a nice day. Like, subscribe, all that stuff. I'll see you in the next one.